Okay, and just for everybody here, the recorded, these meetings are recorded. Things that we type into chat don't become part of the record, so we'll, if you have comments there, we'll read them so that everyone will know what what's going on there. This is the Community Economic Development Committee, April 30th, 2020. And Mandy, will you do the roll call?
Yes. Mr. Whittleton?
Here.
Ms. Kennedy?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Mr. Constant? Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Ms. Zalatal?
Here.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Here.
Chair, you have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Well, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Okay, so we've got a couple items on here, and I don't know about the rest of you, but a lot of this seemed like ancient history when I was going back over it last day or two, even though it's only been a couple months. The first item is discussion of topics for possible updates on marijuana. Looking at, or let me see. I'm afraid I'm going to hang up on him to see who's here. Jeff is probably here for that. Trying to see if there's anyone from the marijuana industry here for this. Brian. Okay, and so on this, I just went through kind of made a little bullet list of issues that we had been looking at, and I don't know that we're here to have time to really make decisions or anything on this, but maybe just make sure we have everybody's issue covered here, and then moving forward in the next few months, see what we'll work on. So one of the issues that we had discussed is limit the number of licenses. Another that Crystal had been working on is kind of figuring out which licenses do we pull for closer attention when they come back for renewal, and why do we pull them, and kind of set some criteria for that. Fees for notices of violations, and perhaps escalating fees for repeat violations. When to require formal use determinations for protected use. Goal would be move the our code closer to the state of Alaska. And Mandy said that Dean and she are working on a list of recent changes by the state that we might want to parallel, or might have to actually parallel. And another request we'd gotten through an email is to add a sign warning non-citizens about legal consequences of marijuana use, since it's still illegal federally. So that was a bullet list that I've got. Anyone else have items there to add?
Mr. Chair, Christopher here. I just don't have them prepared today.
Okay. Did you get that list okay that I went through?
Where would I have gotten the list?
No, did you just pop in to the meeting? Have you been?
Yeah, I got kicked out a couple times, so I'm in now.
All right, welcome. So anybody have thoughts on that? Well, if you want to speak, either chime in or I think you can say something on chat. Say cue me.
John, this is Meg. I don't know if we need to put it on the list, but it is an issue that comes up repeatedly. And it's one, as we have more licenses come online, is this issue of the interior wall, the demising wall, if we want to look at something like some systematic response to that, because it does seem to repeat itself often.
Yeah, that's been one of mine. I'm surprised I didn't put it on my list. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm bobbling my thing here. Okay. What if someone could do a chat message to see? I need to see if Mandy, can you just type hello or something? I want to see if I'm looking in the right place here. Okay, I got it. Okay, hi, everyone. Okay, so it looks chat will work if you want to chime in and I didn't call you. So how would people like to proceed on doing the marijuana things? And we've got those various issues. Maybe at the next meeting outline each of those some way. You want to go around, Meg? You had a thought, Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was thinking maybe if there was a small work group that wanted to kind of take a first crack at kind of everything on the list, maybe go back to those folks who've identified items and flesh them out, and then work through whatever the final list ends up being.
Yeah, well, that's a good thought. Who else? Pete, do you have an idea?
So you're talking about creating a subcommittee?
Yeah, and if any other thoughts on this, we've been kicking this one around for a while and haven't really done much. And poor Jeff Hickman's coming to all our meetings with no progress.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, we're sort of trying to get caught up from lost time here. We've been in a time warp for 6 weeks or so.
this is Christopher. I don't know that you want to make it a subcommittee, more of a working group, I think is a better language. Subcommittees require notice and full participation the same way as committees do, but the working groups can, in small groups of less than 3, tackle issues.
Okay, yeah, appreciate that. Okay, so who wants to be on a working group? I'm happy to be one of them.
Me too.
Meg, Crystal, want to fight over it?
I'm willing if nobody else wants it. I don't care. This is Meg.
Well, this is
Crystal?
Crystal. I don't either. Yeah, I certainly want to work on the component that's the trigger for having a review. So I'm happy to at least do that part. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, any more on this topic?
John, I was wondering, I don't know if you said it or
Go
it
for it.
knows. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in that list, during the debate around Downtown Hope Center and was it Canabaska or whoever was trying to go in there, Alaska Center, there was this issue where the variance standards were basically impossible to meet the way the language was written. And I think that might extend beyond just cannabis, but that's probably where we're going to see it most often. So I think that's another thing that we wanted to look at.
Just in general, how difficult it is to get a variance?
Well, remember there was some specific issue about like the administration has to affirmatively prove there will be no of a certain kind, public safety or something else, some kind of impact on the neighborhood. It's been a little while, but I remember there was a specific one of the criteria that was basically impossible to meet, and we talked at the time about reforming that.
Right. I got, okay, good. Stuff added that here. Good thought. Okay. Dean?
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, I just wanted to add that the variance standards are supposed to be difficult to meet. I wouldn't say they're impossible. Maybe in the Alaska sense and Downtown Hope Center circumstances, but that's to protect impacts on neighboring properties from the uses. But I wanted to add that we had another case, if you recall, where we had granted the variance. It was with that huge 5-acre plus lot in that industrial area. And there was also, I think it was a claimed church use way on the other side, but it was so far away that the variance made sense there. So I just want to say they're not impossible standards. They just don't fit every situation, or you can't prove them in every situation.
Good point. Thank you, Dean. Chris, Constance?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I think Forrest is right in this case. The argument that a petitioner would be required to prove that there is no possible negative impact that could happen to a neighborhood. I think that was a standard that is functionally impossible. And so I would definitely agree, looking closely at that. It was an extraordinary claim that would have to be met and impossible, except for not existing. Not existing in that case would have been the only way you could prove there would be no negative harms. So I think that Mr. Dunbar is accurate that we should be looking closely at that section, not to the point of making it so that anyone can qualify, but to remove some absurdities from it.
Right, okay,
Make it reasonable.
good. It's on the list. See, Austin's here. Any thoughts?
Good morning. I don't have anything to add right now, just listening.
Okay. Anyone else on this topic? I think we have a work group of Chris Constant, Meg Zolotel, and myself. Silence means yes, okay. And we'll get together a meeting probably in the next week or two and start going through this stuff, see where we land. Okay, well, enough for that. So moving on to 3B.
Hey, John.
Yes.
This is Austin. I was just pointing out that Dean had asked to be in the queue, and maybe he wanted to talk about that topic.
Oh, I think we recognized that one.
No, I was done. Well, we would set up a meeting with the work group.
Okay, thanks, Austin.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. So appreciate the help. So 3B, concerns regarding fee increases for contractor inspections related to ordinance 2019-116S as amended. This was, is still an important issue, and it got really sidetracked by COVID issue. And I scanned some things and sent them out last night. I think Crystal got them and then things online, probably emailed them. And it was just paperwork I had from our last meeting on March 5th. So, and going through those, and Bob Dole is here, who's kind of led the way, and Chris Schuette's here. And offhand, Jeff Hickman, if you're here and you want to go back to work, that would be fine. Thank you for coming. The key issues that going through that I found, and I guess other people can chime in and see what they have, and then we'll see if Bob and Chris can respond. And one is that roofers have had trouble with the changes, and my understanding is roofers were not being inspected. They could be, but they weren't. Now they are being inspected, and many of their projects are under that $40,000 limit, so they're paying by inspection. And that was a abrupt surprise to them. Another key issue is that $40,000 split, where above that you pay based on valuation, and below that you pay by inspection. And kind of the possibility of getting rid of that split so that they're all treated equally, just paid by valuation, and then to make up for lost revenue, potentially increase inspection fees or other fees across the board some way. And then also look at, I guess we've initiated video inspections, which sounds pretty good, and just how we'll integrate that and how fees may be associated with that. So going through those are like the three key issues that I found. Or anybody else have other key issues? And then maybe we'll go to Bob Dole and Chris Schuette.
John, this is Ron Thompson.
Oh, Ron. Hi, Ron.
Hi. You mentioned on the re-roof, that was what you stated was kind of incorrect. It really doesn't have to do with the per inspection basis. It's went from a flat fee from 600 to based upon valuation. And so in the old code for commercial re-roofs only, and this is all we're talking, not structural, not fixes, not things like that. And those things can all be found on the first inspection if they actually did work. I think we talked about that. But the re-roof by itself was $600 on the old code. In the new code, it's by valuation. And so the first one we did in January by valuation for just a re-roof, no structural work at all, went up to $4,500. So from $600 to $4,500, and that was very unexpected. Residential re-roofs, I don't think are a problem. They stayed the same and haven't been a problem. So it's really commercial re-roofs only. And so that's why we tried to define re-roof compared with a structural renovation of a roof, because we agree with Bob and the building department on the structural renovation. And most of those projects that are going on that they commented on are being paid like that already. So it's just the re-roof type only that we're talking about. And we were hoping to just have a raised fee on that, another flat fee for just re-roofs, because a re-roof is just going right over the top with a roof for a roof, like for like, and not structural renovation. Structural renovation should be paid by valuation.
Okay, so re-roof is you just peel the membrane off and put in a new one?
That's what the re-roof community discussed, yes. Taking shingles off, putting shingles on, taking EPDM off, putting EPDM on, that type of thing.
Okay. Meg, you're in the queue?
Yes, I would like to hear from Chris and Bob as we start to talk about the specific items. What the rollout was for those businesses we heard some feedback from, because it seemed to be surprised. So I'm just kind of curious about the process of educating them before and then once we got the concerns. I'm thinking primarily of the Circle Plumbing correspondence that was in the packet.
Okay. Do you want to address that now or go through? Does anyone else have like key issues, having gone through things, and then maybe jump to Bob and Chris all at once, or you want to do these questions one at a time?
I'm good adding that to the general list.
Okay. Forrest, you got anything?
Not right now.
Austin?
Nope, I'm good for now.
Pete?
I'm fine right now.
Chris Constant?
Nothing, thank you.
Okay, who else on the committee? Is that it? Okay, and Ron, thanks for the clarification. So Bob and Chris, do you want to go through each of those points and other things that may come up?
Mr. Chair, this is Bob Dole. I'd like to start.
Okay, go ahead, thanks.
And I did respond to your email this morning. I'm not sure if you saw it or not. That will give you just some written comments mirroring what I'm going to say here now. The issue with the re-roofs, there's two components there. Ron has addressed the perception it's just a simple peel it back and replace it. The long and short of it is the higher valuation means bigger area. Usually those are done by areas that they do drive more inspections. There's initially pushback from the roofers on our going back to inspecting that seems to have diminished or gone, that we're no longer hearing those. Our policy letter we're going to finalize and start putting our inspectors up on roofs probably next week. In terms of the re-roof price changes, what we did with this ordinance was we went back to the 2009 and earlier model that did two key things. It removed the disproportionate impact to the smaller business owners who were paying the same flat fee as a large one. So that person that was with the $4,500 permit with a much larger roof wasn't being charged any more than the small business owner with a much smaller one. We also removed the favoritism that was created in the old fee structure for re-roofs over other commercial property renovations. We took an approach of valuation that is pretty much what's done with, we believe, the majority of jurisdictions in the nation. There's some outliers in different ways, but we followed the majority process for the policy reasons that underlie those. And that, I believe, is what the roofers object to. Incidentally, that fee change was included in the briefing materials to the CEDC that we did prior to this, which I note that, that before passage of the ordinance, that we were going back to evaluation rate. There was a specific slide that covered, that mentioned, well, that was one of the specific changes identified. Also, as we reached out to at least one trade group that was mentioned. Turning to the $40,000 issue, we don't believe that is a re-roof issue. That is under 40,000. We retained what AHBA previously requested, and they've since, I understand, abandoned that position for all renovation. That is paying per inspection rather than on valuation. It was amended to create that $40,000 shelf for the truly small job, typically by an owner builder, not to have to pay for additional work being done. And we haven't heard anything from the small homeowners complaining that they can do a reduced rate, but rather the small contractors that were previously paying for the per inspection and still are would now like the benefit of the new fee structure that is provided for valuation above 40,000. We can remove that $40,000 limit there. In many ways, it'd make administration easier for a department. However, overall, it would require an increase in the base multiplier used for all permits, including new, in order to remove that, should we want to go forward that way. Moving along.
Excuse me, Bob, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Bob,
Yeah,
can I ask one quick question on that?
Who is that? Is that Ron?
This is Ron Thompson.
Let me, I guess could Bob finish up, and then I've got Drew, and then Ron, I can include you. Would that work? Let's do that. So Bob, you want to finish that point, and then I'll go to Drew and then Ron?
I think I covered the gist of it there in terms of that $40,000 mark there. And just what we did below and above it in terms of why it was amended, as opposed to the initial bill that was just going to be a minimum with valuation all the way up. Go ahead, Chair.
Do you know how much, like what percent the valuation fee would go up then?
I can't give it to you by percent as I sat here. This is Bob Dole again. Sorry about that. But we can supplement that. I'm working out of the EOC this morning before I do a couple other things, but we can provide that to you in the next 2 days if that's okay.
Yeah, that'd be fine. It'd be interesting to hear. So, okay, let me go to Drew Casson.
Yeah, thanks so much, John. I just wanted to sort of clarify regarding the sub $40,000 project, that it was my understanding that way back when this was first being introduced, that the HBA organization had expressed some skepticism about changing the types of fee structures. It was not my impression that at any point the group had asked for sub 40,000 to be treated differently, and that what had been represented to me was that it was actually Assemblywoman Zalatal who had sort of, in the interest of protecting sort of homeowners and people who were doing very small projects, sought the variance to the way that this had originally been brought forward by the administration. And so I think what that created has become pretty apparent, is that you have a variety of projects that have the potential to pay, in some cases, substantially more, 3 or 4 times the amount that a larger project, which required more inspections, would end up costing. So it sort of just created this weird place where smaller projects cost more than bigger ones. And going back to what the administration had originally brought forward to the Assembly just seems like a much more balanced and equitable sort of position. But I think there may have been some confusion around the industry asking for this treatment of the sub $40,000 stuff. I have found nobody on our end who at this point, anyways, feels that that's a good idea.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Ron Thompson.
Through the chair, I'm kind of monitoring and muting as we go through. For call-ins, if you hit *6, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you.
This is Ron Thompson. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
Okay, yeah, exactly what he just said. We initially just with AHBA met and we talked about just keeping the fee structure similar. But once it was identified that it was definitely going to go, we'd rather have it all set one way. And the issue was when the fees and the calculations and the figures were set, they were set prior to this amendment. So I'm a little confused that we have to raise the fees after, because they had done a calculation prior to set all those fees prior to this amendment. Then the amendment went in, and the byproduct is many permits under 40,000, which the intent was to be cheaper for people, ended up being more expensive. And we do a lot of permits. I do a lot of these permits for people, and we're definitely paying more for a sub $40,000 permit in many cases than we are for the 40,000 and above. So I think the intent was correct, trying to get it cheaper for those small projects so people would actually come in. But the effect of paying by inspection is the number of inspections have been driven up because of the way the inspection requirements are. Therefore, the cost ended up being higher. So I think it's an unintended consequence of trying to do the right thing, but it ended up causing more issues than are good.
Okay, thank you. Meg, you're pointed to regarding this amendment. Do you have some thoughts on it?
Not off the cuff, no, sorry.
Okay, no, it's okay. Okay, Bob, so we've talked about removing that 40K, which sounds like you're amenable to, and you might want to reevaluate the overall fees if you do that, and you'll get back to us on that.
Mr. Chair, that's correct. To clarify, speaking AHBA's position was in favor of per inspection. It wasn't a 40K shelf with a different condition above and below. We can show the additional cost that incurs to all permits because, as AHBA and Ron pointed out, many of those jobs under 40K require a disproportionate amount of inspections for the amount of work done. That is why they originally went to the last version of the fee ordinance had a per inspection focused on those smaller jobs that draw a disproportionate amount of inspections and not wanting that cost to be borne by the entire industry as opposed to those smaller jobs. But we can give you the multiplier for that. Given how much has changed, we just need to recheck our math on that before I try to recall what we calculated that at previously. There will be an increase, though, to get rid of that $40,000 shelf.
Okay, so just to clarify, so you're saying some smaller projects actually take more inspections than a larger project?
They proportionately they do. If you look at the dollars versus the work done, frequently they do take more for the amount of dollars spending on it.
Okay. Okay, thanks. So, yeah, okay, and then now we're doing video inspections as well. That was, how's that going?
Mr. Chair, that's correct. Before COVID struck, we already had a policy letter go out about doing video re-inspections, and we went ahead and went live with that before COVID became a happening thing. Since that, the industry hasn't taken me to task. I did issue an emergency order substantially expanding the range of areas where we are doing video inspections now, particularly to avoid going into occupied areas or where it's difficult to maintain social distancing. That is anecdotally, I can tell you day to day what we did there. Until I can pry some IT support back from the EOC, I cannot tell you the actual numbers we are doing. It seems to be working very well. I also have a policy letter out there that industry apparently is not embracing to offer on retros that require where a second inspection is required, we would not charge for that second inspection that the language of the statute seems to call for if it's possible to do it by video. I've received no positive feedback or any feedback though, so apparently the industry wants those actual eyes to physically travel out to those sites. The long and short of where we're going with video inspections there. And in terms of the rollout, I'm going down to Assemblymember Zolotel's question. We did roll out, we offered lunch and learn sessions available to talk to any concerns about the fees coming up. We did, obviously, we briefed at the CEDCs. We offered to breach out to industry groups ahead of time of the rollout of the fee structure. Since then, we've been meeting individually to explain the fee structure to folks going forward. I continue to offer the Wednesday meetings with industry. Early on, we had some substantial discussions of the new fee structure. That seems to have died down.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Yeah, that's Meg.
Yeah, sorry. I was trying to
Yeah.
type Q and all the buttons at once. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dole. I appreciate that. I know we have some folks who aren't necessarily with or hooked into associations. Can you tell me a little bit about how we reach those independent operators? Is it just when they first start coming back in for permits, or is there like an email listserv or email list, just so that if I encounter independent operators or we see something like Circle Plumbing, we can be pointing them back to the right spot?
Through the chair, it's very difficult to give a one-size-fits-all educational scheme for folks. I think the best thing they can do is, one, go to our website to see what policies and information are out there. And we also, as soon as we get the ordinances, we update those as a link, the relevant Title 23 ones. But the long and short of it, given the chances for taking something out of context, the best bet is just to call the permit staff or email is the best way to do it. And someday we may even let people in the building again.
Thank you, Mr. Dole. I have to compliment you too. The new website is really fantastic. So good work on your team there. And if folks haven't had a chance to check it out, it's a vast improvement, and it makes it a lot easier to navigate quite a few things.
Oh, good. Okay.
Mr.
I guess
Chair,
while we're,
so,
is that Crystal?
yeah, and I just
Go
noticed that
ahead.
you might have Drew in the queue, so
Right.
maybe check in with Drew. Okay, thanks.
Do you want to go first, Crystal, or go back to Drew?
No, I was just mentioning, it looked like Drew was sitting there in the queue, and I just wanted to make sure you saw him. Thanks.
Okay, sure. Okay, Mr. Casson.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to, I thought that Bob had a key turn of phrase there that I wanted to cue on with regards to those smaller permits might cost disproportionately more, but it's not absolutely more. And so it makes sense to charge those smaller projects disproportionately more relative to the value of the project. It doesn't make sense to charge them absolutely more because they aren't costing more than the larger projects. They just cost proportionately more. So that's why I think cutting off your sliding scale at the $40,000 valuation means all those small projects have to pay as if they were larger projects. And that's sort of the solution that we've proposed and brought forward, which I think appropriately balances that.
So are you saying that, so the current rate is 0.009 times the valuation, and that should be carried through all size projects? Or are you saying that the smaller ones might pay, 0.001 and the larger ones?
Well, what we had proposed was if you cut off the sliding of the scale and you say there's a minimum fee as if all projects are valued at 40,000, then you sort of address the fact that some of those small projects, if they did pay that same valuation rate, would be paying sort of a real pittance, despite the fact that they still require a couple of inspections. If you just set that $40,000 threshold that the administration seemed comfortable with, then if all smaller projects pay at that rate, then I think that proportionality issue of small projects costing more than they're bringing in is thoroughly dealt with.
Sorry. So pretend all small projects are $40,000?
Yep, that would
Can
set a
it be-
minimum fee of $360, which
I
is
see.
$10 more actually than the administration had originally proposed.
Okay, I understand. So, okay, good, thank you. Bob, any comment on that?
Through the chair, that fails fiscally. What we know now that we didn't know then is those smaller jobs frequently require at least that works great for the owner builder. It does not work for the typical contractor that's more in the 3 to 5 range. Again, we're incurring additional cost for those additional inspections. And anytime you create a shelf at any level, we've already had to initiate enforcement actions against contractors trying to game the 40K shelf. Anytime you create that at any level, it creates an artificiality in there. With the benefit of seeing how this one rolled out, probably the cleanest way is to eliminate that shelf and go to a uniform rate throughout the spectrum, if you will, just like we have on, and go forward from there.
Okay, good, thanks. Forrest?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So two clarifying questions and a comment. I guess the comment first is, it's true that I think Ms. Zolotel proposed that amendment, but we all voted for it. So, you know,
Right.
we all put that in there. The questions are, so I thought you guys were in agreement there for a second, and now it sounds like there's a disagreement. But I thought what Drew was asking for was for a uniform rate throughout, and I think that's what you just said, Bob, that you were proposing. So can someone clarify to me why you're not in agreement? What exactly is the point of contention if you're both in agreement that the 40,000 threshold should be removed?
Through the chair, can I address that? This is Bob Dole.
Oh, yes, please do.
Okay, so first, Assembly Member Dunbar, the department also, in looking at the amendment, thought we could find a way to make it work and did not foresee how it would actually work in implementation. So we share in the credit for where we're at this point. I think the difference, as I understood what AHBA just presented, is talking about that minimum fee as if at 40,000 at $360. That $360 is basically a little over 2 inspections. That doesn't get us there. What we're seeing now for what those under 40K construction jobs look like, if we're looking at 5 inspections, that would otherwise be 5 times 175. So to the extent we can go with a constant valuation straight up, initially it looked like instead of 0.009, it would be 0.00923. I would like to recalculate those given the new market. It was a de minimis add, but it was an add to the valuation rate for the whole spectrum. And I would like to confirm that before saying that was the actual additor on it. But there was a small add that would go to the spectrum. Anytime you create a shelf at any level, it leads to unnatural actions by those that think they can come in. If they report above or below it, it's in their economic interest rather than just being forthright with the valuation. When they do that, it subjects them to actions for violating the building code as a fraudulent permit.
Can I ask a follow-up,
Mr. Chair?
Yeah. Go ahead,
Chair,
Forrest, and
let me
then
just
Chris.
add a dollar figure to Bob's comment, if I may.
Okay, Chris, go ahead.
Just to
Judy.
close out Bob's comment, the de minimis amount that we calculated when the artificial threshold was put into place was about $131,000. It was in the summary of economic effects in the original ordinance. So that's, to Bob's point, the de minimis impact of it is about $131,000.
So I'm sorry, Chris, just to clarify. So if we got rid of that $40,000 shelf, made everything 0.009, that would lead to a shortfall of 130,000?
That's, sorry, let me say it the other way around. When the $40,000 threshold was put into place, what it did create is a $131,000 deficit in revenue that had to be accounted for in the S version of the fee ordinance. There were other items that changed in the S version as well that modified the overall summary of economic effects in different directions. Some added, some deleted or removed revenue. But this particular one was a $131,000 shift. It is de minimis in the grand scheme of things.
Can I ask a follow-up, Mr. Shelton?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so two follow-ups on that. And I mean, I think, unless I'm misunderstanding, that's good news then, because we're talking about getting rid of that 40K threshold. And if that 40K threshold caused us a $130,000 deficit, then we should be looking at increased revenues, right? But so the two things are, one, just to sort of put a finer point on it, because Mr. Kaysen was talking about this absolute value. Is it the case now that there are some projects that, let's say there's a project that's $39,000 and another project is $41,000? Are there cases where the $39,000 project actually pays more in absolute terms than the $41,000 project?
Through the chair, this is Bob Dole again. There are cases where they will pay more because they require more inspections. They incur more costs to the department. By the time other fees go up with zoning review and things like that, typically they come out pretty close to a draw if they're that close. But if they take, depending on the number of inspections is the long and short of it, because those inspections are cost we have to sink into servicing the permit.
So if we remove that $40,000 threshold and make it all based on valuation, it does seem like there would be some very small projects where the fee couldn't cover the expenses of the department. So, I mean, is there some other threshold level, or is there a way to have no threshold at all without creating kind of sort of absurd outcomes for the department?
Through the chair, this is Bob Dole. The best way to eliminate the threshold is to allow for a small incremental add to the that 0.009. There are several things in play with the S version, and what we did do in the process of setting things up, we factored in the additional inspection revenue we would get below 40K to reduce the overall cost of that one. But we can eliminate the long and short. We can eliminate the shelf if we have a small incremental add for the whole spectrum of residential construction, and that way you kind of get parity or fairness throughout the spectrum between a person doing a $20,000 job and a $2 million job. They're paying a comparable amount for the building services. It's not disproportionately impacting smaller jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, I guess, who was that?
This is Ron. Is there a way to log in without talking to try to get in the queue?
People are doing chat and their name shows up. Mandy, is that something Ron Thompson can do?
If he has Teams, he can. If it's just the call-in, there isn't.
Oh.
Are you just calling in, Ron?
I just called in this time. Next time
Okay, then I think you do what you've been doing. You just say,
okay.
Hi.
I just have a question. I have just one question.
Okay, Forrest, were you through?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else on the committee before we move to Ron Thompson? Okay. Ron, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Ron Thompson again. Bob, when you do the change in the overall number, the 0.009, to add a little bit more to it for all of the projects, would you still put a minimum fee like you've done on the commercial side? And that's, I think, what we were talking about at the 360, where there's a minimum fee for, you take away the 40,000, but the minimum fee for a permit period starts at 360 and then goes up. And then you're just talking about a slight 0.009, adding something to make up that 130,000. Is that way on a overall thing? That number won't be very big, so it'd be kind of spread out amongst everything, and that would make sense.
Bob?
Yes, through the chair. Ultimately, we'll pass our recommendations to the assembly, and we would strongly advocate for a minimum fee because for any permit there is just some sunk admin costs that go with it. We can base what that multiplier on is, or that additive to the multiplier based on what the assembly feels is a reasonable minimum fee. Is that 360? Is it 300? Is it 500? We can do infinite scenarios, but we would frankly prefer, given limited staff time, since we're doing several things right now, if there's a sense of the assembly on what they are comfortable with as a ranges for that minimal range, we can staff those rather than just doing something involving dice or darts to figure that out.
Okay, so now we have the work. That might be reasonable, but Drew, Mr. Casson? Drew?
I'll be really quick. I just wanted to address Forrest had asked a question earlier, and I wanted to sort of put some numbers on it. Is it possible for a smaller project that consumes fewer municipal resources to, in the status quo, be asked to pay more than a larger project that consumes more resources? And I would posit a $20,000 project requiring 10 inspections would pay 2 or 3 times the amount that a $40,000 project requiring 20 inspections would pay, because all the 20 inspections are included in the one single fee they pay, which is itself lower than the smaller project would hit after just 2 or 3 inspections, would already have passed that. And then after that, every additional inspection would be sort of a surplus, despite the fact that at the end of the day, they've used 10 inspections, half of what the larger project that's paying 1/3 of what they're being asked to pay.
Right, I think that's the core issue here.
Mr. Chair, this is Bob Dole. Can I address that?
Yes, please.
It's a nice hypothetical that isn't borne out in the industry in terms of the work that is actually done on these, unless you're looking at second redo inspections for work that wasn't done right the first time. Frankly, the actual work out there doesn't support that model.
So, Bob, if maybe rephrase. So, typical small job does not require a whole lot of inspections that would bump it over the cost of a larger project. But some projects that maybe something goes wrong, then the re-inspections add up and bump them over?
Mr. Chair, there's already a separate provision for second re-inspections, not first one, but second ones for unresolved issues. But generally, many small jobs take 3 to 5 inspections under 40,000, which would be the loss leaders, without spreading that without spreading the multiplier across the spectrum. For those other jobs, though, just for the scope of work, you can look at the framing of an entire house for an inspection, or you can look at the cutout for one expanded window for an inspection. So bigger jobs cost-wise don't, we just don't see the additive, we don't see those sorts of scenarios in terms of actual number of inspections done increasing exponentially at the 40K part that we actually see that. Contractors are out there to make money to efficiently, and waiting for inspections isn't efficient, so they have everything ready to go at once usually. That we don't see that in terms of the industry, the disproportionate impact Drew has theorized here.
Okay. Just a clarification. So if someone is doing a bathroom and there's the fan to check and also some plumbing, is that 2 separate inspections, even if it's the same guy at the same time? Or is that one inspection doing 2 things?
Through the chair, to the extent work is ready to be inspected, the mechanical and the plumbing are both done as one inspection. Depending on the nature of the cutouts and what was done, there may be 2 inspected for. There may be 2 inspections required, but if both things are ready to go at the same time, it's one inspection.
Okay. Okay, so that's important. I think some of the things we saw from Circle Plumbing were they different? I mean, did an inspector go out, look at several things, but charge an inspection fee for each thing they looked at, or was that an issue in that example?
Through the chair, that was not the issue. Circle Plumbing had was retros that the work that was inspected, mechanical and plumbing was inspected, but other work for the same retro permit required a second inspection. Looking at the language of the statute is where that second one would draw a second inspection fee, because only one inspection comes with a retro. That's where I put out the policy letter offering to waive that second inspection fee if we can do it by video inspection. However, neither Circle nor HBA nor anyone else has voiced any support for that.
But you didn't get support, you got no comment on the video?
No,
Is that correct?
no comment whatsoever, which if people are not going to participate in video inspections, it doesn't necessarily make sense to sink the cost into setting up and changing our processes to accommodate it.
That's surprising. Most people like free.
I can't speak for the industry.
Maybe we can go. Is that Ron?
Yes.
Sure, go ahead.
A lot of times when the industry doesn't mind the policy, they don't make comments, they just move on, and so we figure that it's going to go in place. Most of the time, I only respond if I think it needs to be revised. So actually, I think I've heard positive feedback, Bob, that people would be using the video conferencing if they can, if it works out and it's set up and ready to go. So I think there's more positive to that than you might think by not getting comments.
Because Bob Dole, we're doing at least probably about a dozen video inspections elsewhere, and overall, even stuff people like, at least somebody has chimed up as positive. I'll count Ron's comment as a positive from the industry.
I'd go with that. Mr. Casson, you got a comment on this?
Yeah, we like video inspections.
All right, we've vastly increased your positives there, Bob.
And these remain open for industry to look at on the website ahead of these meetings if they choose to interact with us too.
Okay. From the committee, any comments on inspections and so on?
Mr. Chair, this is Crystal.
Crystal?
Yes. I guess my comment really is more of a question, but I guess what I keep struggling with is just this concept of value. And I know that there's a whole range of value that can be put into a project just because you can buy the cheap stuff or you can buy the really expensive stuff. And it seems to me that there's just a lot of inconsistency with the scope of work of a project with the idea of what that value is. And so I guess I think we had a bit of a conversation about this before. So I guess I'm just looking for some more direction in how you actually define the value of a project when we know that there is a lot of variation in value of materials that go into a project. So, thanks.
Bob, can you address that?
Through the chair, good morning, Assembly Member Kennedy. We normally defer to the definition of value from the contractor, which is looking at their contract value. There are tables, if something appears awry, there is guidance we can use from the ICC to determine objectively what that value should be if it appears skewed. But frankly, 99%, we defer to the contractor to define the value of the work being done. In terms of the value of the inspections, I think from the macro level of the insurance discounts available to commercial properties, from the building code enforcement grading system to the increased life safety we see in inspected properties, we can address it that way. But the value of the work being done, there are definitions of how you assess that with the ICC, but frankly, we normally defer to the contractor.
Crystal, follow up?
Well, I guess I appreciate that, the fact that it's, that you're deferring to the builder. But again, if somebody's actually doing the value of what their project is, I'm assuming they're going to say, well, this countertop costs this much, this fixtures, whatever. We just know that there's really a huge range when you're finishing out a project, those of materials that are available, whether it's cabinetry or flooring or whatever. And so I guess I'm still just kind of wondering how that really gets effectively reflected in the value of a project. If a builder's being honest, he's going to tell you what he's spending on cabinetry and sinks and whatever else. But we all know that there's really a range in there, but that doesn't impact the actual need for inspections for those things. A sink is a sink, a fan is a fan. So anyway, I guess I just am not sure really how that works. It just seems to me that going to that true real need for inspections rate would seem to work better. I mean, I certainly understand, trying to give, a flat rate for something where a certain kind of a project is going to require a certain number of permits. So I'm still trying to kind of wrestle with this whole idea of just working off of a value. So anyway, thank you.
All right, thanks. Mr. Gates, you're in the queue. Dean?
Yes, thank you. I had a question about a two-part question. So, Mr. Dole, is there a process or in, I guess, the permit application review, where staff verifies the contractor's valuation calculation in the table? I mean, is there a check on the municipal side for the contractor's work? And the second part is there any, I guess, precedent or other prior actions, I guess, based on contractors who have misvalued or undervalued or anything like that? As I understand it, contractors get a municipal license, so they are, I guess, sort of duty bound and obligated to render an accurate valuation. Is there any history of some license or enforcement action based on miscalculations?
Bob, can you address that?
Through the chair, good morning, Mr. Gates. To answer your questions, normally what happens is the permit technician does a quick assessment looking at the work described versus the value reported by the contractor. We do not do 100% screening of all of them. It's frankly cost prohibitive in staff time. If something appears awry, they will refer it to one of the plan reviewers, who will then evaluate the work done in accordance with ICC accepted tables and multipliers to estimate valuation, to flag it as an issue. That happens probably 10 to 12 times a year. In terms of what happens at that point, if you request a building permit misrepresenting the value, it's not a valid permit. You're looking at a misrepresent. So we take appropriate administrative action in that case, and we have on occasion probably about 5 to 10 times a year where the valuation has been outrageously off. Sometimes a multiplier of tenfold. But there is a fine, and ultimately we could pursue a contractor license revocation. If we ever get to updating the admin code, I have proposed a more transparent process for that than the existing code. But I realize the adoption of the current building code is kind of going to be delayed into summer.
Okay, thank you. Dean, did you have a follow-up?
No, it's an impressive process. Thanks, Mr. Dole.
All right, thanks. So we talked about, okay, so that was the kind of list of 4 points there. Is anyone else on the committee have other points on this? Okay, so it sounds like we'll take a look at removing that $40,000, and then Bob, you wanted parameters on how much were you going to offer us? A couple options on the fee increases to look at, or how would you like to kind of gave it to us?
Mr. Chair, we would ask, rather than assuming infinite models, if you could give us maybe the range of a minimum fee you would be looking for. Is that a 300 and a 500? Is it a 250 and a 750? We'd like to run a couple models for you to give you some brackets to give you an idea of what that multiplier would look like with different ones. But we would really like to know the will of the assembly rather than guessing, wasting everyone's time with that.
Okay. So committee, any guidance for the staff?
This is Ron. I could give you a.
Hey, Ron.
Yeah, this is Ron Thompson again. We as in the calculation formula, the 360 seemed to be what the cost of a permit would be right at 40,000. So it seems like a great starting point, and then set the 100 and, base the calculation to see if you can get to the $131,000 based upon a standard normal year of permitting with regard to a base fee of 360 plus whatever it takes to get to make up that 131,000. That seems to be a fair starting point.
Okay, and any other thoughts, committee members?
Mr. Chair, this is Chris. Thank you for the comments, Ron, and we will use that in our calculations.
That makes sense too. Is there, but we're also hearing that 360, there's some logic to that because it hits that 40,000 threshold. But what we're hearing from Bob is, but that only covers 2 inspections, and there's usually, what would be a more typical number of inspections?
Mr. Chair, the typical number has been the crux of the challenge with those small jobs, and to take the owner builder that originally started this discussion that is going to expand a window with 2 inspections, and then to assume that now that the crux is 3 or 4, starts making that window that window change out more problematic. We can run some averages for that under 40K amount, but I think we're going to be going back to the challenges of the cost point it creates for the truly small job. But we will get you an average, try to figure out an average number of inspections. I'm somewhat constrained on getting IT resources now because they're all hanging out with me in the library. So.
Okay, I think that'd be helpful. Otherwise, and this is the point you made, the entire industry is subsidizing the smaller jobs. Is that correct? Or could be?
Through the chair, and that is a bigger policy level. It could be, however, normally most policy looks at a proportionate impact across the spectrum, as we did with re-roofs on this code version. So to the extent you have the same proportionate impact, you can quote have the bigger jobs subsidizing the little jobs, or you can have a proportionate impact across the spectrum. I guess it depends how you evaluate it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Ms. Altel?
Actually, is Dean in before me, or did he go in the 5-10 minutes since his note?
I think we got Dean. He did ask about the truthfulness evaluations and the consequences.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I appreciate this discussion. I have to say, I can't do math on the fly like this, to be perfectly honest. So as these options are laid out, it'd be really great to see them in some kind of a chart or a table as to the different I think we've talked about it, what's currently happening, threshold, and then what Mr. Joel just articulated as the difference if we wanted to subsidize. We could see those laid out in time so we could consider them in relation to one another. That would be great.
Okay. So, Bob, what's a realistic timeline given your constraints now? Is it like in a month, 2 months, 2 weeks?
Mr. Chair, I would ask for a month at this point. I'm frantically trying to close down a facility to accomplish a six-figure savings in the next week and do some other things like that in my new day job. So if we could have a month, I think that would be ideal to get it to you right. We have a lot of contract mods to do on the EOC side on the short term.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, let's plan on that at this point. So I know other major issues. So a question for industry folks, which is, I guess we have just Drew and Ron. We've got a 25% discount on permit fees throughout the emergency, or maybe it's throughout the year at this point, because at least during the emergency. And is that helping enough so that this is not something that needs to be settled this year? We'll go to Drew real quick.
Yeah, so I guess I would be also interested in Ron's feedback. His tenure in the industry is a lot longer than mine is. I would say that certainly on the sub 40,000 stuff, I think that 25% reduction goes a really long ways to offsetting some of the initial sticker shock that some folks with small projects were having. I would say that there seems to be some issue on the re-roof topic. And maybe it just won't get dealt with, but that was one where I think we've got some folks who have sort of pulled permits that said no, don't go ahead with permits for jobs that were costing over $20,000 for that would have cost $600 4 or 5 months ago. I think for them, the scale they're looking at to go from 600 to 20,000 is not really addressed by the 25%. I think the sub 40,000 stuff is much more so. Yeah.
This is Ron.
Okay, good. Thank you, Ron.
Yeah, this is Ron. The residential side of things, where the $40,000 number kicks in, this doesn't even matter. It's a commercial re-roof permit, and so it's the commercial one that they would like to be addressed. And they really, in a time now that they're trying to get people to spend money and do projects, it's very imperative to try to get to it now. I think Bob and them in a month, I think that's more than fair to kind of come back and get, present a number in a month. The sub 40,000 permits, remember, some of them are paying well over what a 40,000 permit is. So it's set up kind of more unfair, even with the 25%, because everybody above gets 25% too. So I think it'd just be fair to try to address and get this cleaned up and straight now. If they have a month to do it, I think I don't think what we're asking is, or what you guys have talked about, what they said to do, to come up with the quick math to set a fee and then proportionally base it upon making that up to $130,000. I think would be a very easy math equation, because they've already had the table, and Bob has those nice layout tables that he can just represent that they presented before. So I think it won't be a huge exercise to do that. The bigger thing is the philosophy on the re-roofs. That's a big philosophy difference. And so maybe they can look at that, maybe they won't. But that's probably even the bigger issue than the 40,000 for now. But the 40,000 is costing people in some ways, it's why we changed the fees years ago, was to try to get away from the valuation and do it by number of inspections. But we understand why they're trying to change it back. So it is what it is, and we've just grown in agreement to their new process, and we're trying to just streamline it to make it the easiest for everyone.
Okay, thank you. We got Dean and then Crystal in the queue. Dean, go ahead.
Oh, yes, thank you. I want to ask about the timing for a change to the fee structure. And I mean, completely agree that a month is very fair for then Mr. Dole to get the information that Ms. Salatel and committee members have asked for. But I guess that leaves June and maybe July to get an ordinance passed for the change. And that's already in the middle of construction season. So what would be sort of an effective date for a fee change? Are you guys looking at asking for this to be retroactive to apply to this construction season, or would we only be looking at it applying at the date passed, or maybe January 1, 2021? What do you envision to be the best effective date, given our timing for passage?
Are you asking the industry?
Let's go to Bob real quick, and then
who'd like to answer?
This is Bob Dole. I note that at this point we're up 20% in valuation over last year, and that is mostly commercial at this point. So commercial is chugging along and taking care of business. We would ask that we avoid future retroactive dates. We do not have the overtime funded available to do that, and going into building season, that will be very difficult to do retroactively. Also, to the extent that this is for the immediate emergency, we would ask that it be terminate with the other 25% reduction, but we would ask effective date be upon passage. We frankly, the capacity for manually doing these things is, these refunds is daunting if we're going to do our cost containment, also an overall labor cost without overtime.
Can you quickly remind me, that 25% discount, is that just through the emergency?
Through the chair, I believe that's through the end of this year.
Okay.
Chris
That's
Schutte
correct.
can correct me if I'm
Expires on
wrong.
December 31.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I've got Crystal, and then Drew.
Could I follow?
Dean. Dean, you want to follow up? Go ahead, Dean.
Yes, I just wanted to follow up. I completely agree. Retroactive effects are very disfavored. I'm concerned effective upon passage is in the middle of the season. To me, it sort of makes good sense to have this effective the beginning of the year, January 2021. But I mean, I just wondered if that's a rational effective date or not. So we will think about that as we go forward next time. I mean, next meeting or after we get the numbers.
Good.
Through the
Thank
chair,
you, Dean.
in response to
Chris?
Mr. Gates, Mr. Weddleton, one of the components that Bob highlighted as being challenging in issuing refunds currently, frankly, also applies in some of the updates to fee schedules, et cetera. So keep in mind that we've got a very busy staff processing permits right now, and implementing a change to the fee calculation schedule in late June or July definitely will require a heavy lift on our part when it's hitting at the busiest point of our season. So while I know Bob and his team can accomplish anything, that is certainly something to keep in mind. And the question about an effective date of Jan 1, 21 is frankly a good question to ask.
Okay. But I think what we learned too, though, is we'd want to have something settled, at least in the fall, so that people bidding projects would know. So the sooner word gets out, the sooner the change is, the better for the industry at any rate. Is that an issue to either Chris or Bob?
No, that sounds rational. Thank you.
Through the chair, that should be easy for us to execute on that front. If we know in the fall, we can easily be in place by January.
Okay. Crystal, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if it's a question as much as a comment, maybe for some discussion. But I suspect there's a great deal of those commercial permitting that is on behalf of the Anchorage School District. And we typically have roof repairs like almost every summer, and there's certainly a big chunk of them in the most recent bond. So I don't want to see there be some kind of disproportionate cost going to the school district because there's this anomaly in re-roofing. So anyway, I guess I'm just kind of out there because again, like I said, I'm pretty sure a lot of those commercial permitting is basically going to be taxpayer funded bond costs or revenues. So anyway, just hoping that we're keeping in mind that we want to make sure that we don't disproportionately charge costs to something like the school district in which all taxpayers are going to end up paying for. So thanks.
Okay, that was a good point. Thank you. Bob, I see you in the queue. Also, Drew. Bob, did you want to address that?
Through the chair, real briefly, again, like we would do with the under 40K, we have to look at a multiplier for other fees. If this group wants to tell us what they envision for a different commercial re-roof rate, we can show you what the added would be to the multiplier for commercial properties to absorb that cost if we're going to not treat this the same as other commercial valuation for re-roofs. Just if you all want to tell us if what you have in mind for a different rate or a flat fee, we can show you what the added cost would be to other commercial construction.
Mr. Chair, can I follow up then?
Yeah, please.
Well, I just wondered if there wouldn't be a fairer way of just going by straight square footage. We know that they're buying materials to cover a certain square footage of that roof. So why would we not try to have some kind of multiplier per square foot?
Through the chair, that's this is Bob Dole. That's what we do now with valuation that was found unacceptable to the industry.
Was acceptable or was not?
Was not acceptable in the requirement and the request to go back to the old flat fees. So again, I have to get off this call in 13 minutes, but I've somebody wants to tell us what multiplier they're looking for. We can model from there to show you the added cost to the rest of the industry to do a different valuation rate for re-roofs than from other work.
This is Ron. I could make a comment.
Well, let me go back to Drew then, holding Bob's question a bit. And Drew, you're in the queue, Mr. Caston.
Yeah, this is it actually maybe makes more sense to take Ron if he's gonna address what Bob just talked about. I wanted to go back to something from a while before.
Okay, Ron, you want to go on that issue?
Again, most of the school district projects are structural related, so they're based upon valuation, and that is based upon all the other commercial normal standard procedures. That's not the issue. We're talking just re-roofs, and re-roofs did have set fees based upon ranges of square footage before. It was like 0 to 1,000, 1,000 to 3,000, and 3,000 and above. And so they had 3 set fees prior to, and that's what the industry was looking for re-roofs only. And I think it all comes down to the definition of re-roofs and what drives costs and what doesn't. And yeah, for the most part, there have been inspections. The Muni somehow chose not to do inspection on re-roofs, but that's all right. If they do inspections and they need to come back, then there could be something put in together for that. But most of the time when you're doing a re-roof, there's nothing to look at. There's just the material and it's all covered up. They don't even pull off insulation a lot of times to even look at the sheathing. So I don't know. I think it's a definition, and and that's where I think that the question comes in. Seattle does a flat fee like $110 for re-roofs or something like that. So I'm not really, it's not the structural portion and the ones that drive up the inspection numbers that we're talking. We're talking just pulling roofing off and putting roofing back on. That's the only ones that they're asking. And those ones, they don't have a problem at going from 600 to 1,000, but from 600 to 4,500 seems just excessive for when they're not looking at it. It doesn't seem excessive when it's a structural remodel, and those ones aren't. Those are handled by the valuation. So anyway, that's what we've been trying to get across.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Ron. Anything else on this topic? We're not helping Bob with a threshold. Take all of us going back and doing math.
Mr. Chair?
Crystal?
Yes, thank you. I guess I'm thinking that we need to just go back to the flat rate fee for a re-roof. If we have a non-structural project on for re-roofing and that's not getting an inspection, that absolutely makes no sense to me at all that we would increase any kind of a fee on it. In fact, it is kind of unreasonable to think that it even has a $600 fee. So I guess I'm not sure if somebody buys a permit for a re-roof and they're not getting any inspection, what are they paying for?
Bob?
Through the chair, we're not going back to the previous practice of not inspecting re-roofs, which I contend was a dereliction of the building official's duties. Rather, every section of roof will have, even that skin it back will have 2 inspections, one to look at it when it's skinned back and one to look at when it's redone completely. So every re-roof draws 2 inspections. And what's missing in the analysis of the flat rate from 3,000 feet and above is somebody that's refinishing a 30,000 or 40,000 square foot roof is not going to do it all at once. They're going to do it in phases or days. So if weather comes in, they don't have exposed roof. So every re-roof gets work there now. We're not, the prior practice that was abandoned, the prior practice in place for the last 10 years or so of not inspecting roofs is one of the other things that is changing simultaneously with this. And that policy letter has been out to the industry. We have some feedback and we will be finalizing on Monday.
Okay, well, that helps. Explanation work help. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? So we're getting close to our end here. I know Mr. Dole has to go back to their work. Mr. Caston, you had a comment?
Yeah, just one. I heard talk of the sunsetting, the stuff we've been talking about around the time the 25% decrease was sunsetted. And I just wanted to say that neither the 40,000, the sub 40,000, nor the re-roof issue were in our minds stimulus measures at all. These were, conversations around a well-functioning fee structure that makes sense and equitably sort of balances the interests of all parties. So we're looking to make a robust system for the future, not just to sort of spur the building industry for this summer.
Right. So, yeah, I think we're all on board with that. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, just to clarify.
Again, or Chris Judy?
Just to clarify, thanks for that comment, Drew. I think if that was communicated, that was incorrectly communicated. We were talking about the date that it took effect.
Oh, okay. It was somewhat garbled throughout, and so I could swear I heard the term sunset, and so just wanted to make sure that I had that on the record. That makes sense. Appreciate the clarification.
All right, thanks. Okay, any comments from committee members?
Mr. Chair, this is
Crystal. Go ahead.
Thank you. I guess in an effort to give some kind of a guidance now over this roofing thing, I guess I would make sense to me if there is a roof that is going to have multiple days and going to take multiple inspections, that the rate ought to reflect those numbers of inspections. And it seems to me that 4,500 is probably like 30 inspections. So, or maybe not that many, but anyway, somewhere between 20 and 30. So it seems to me that would be an excessive number of inspections. So if there's a range, the 1,000 to 5,000 range, use that range again, but it should be each of those ranges should be a reflection of how many inspection or how many times an inspector might have to go out to look at a roof should be reflected in that range. So that would be my guidance, that if there's going to be a roof that requires somebody to go out 3 times, and that's the equivalent of 3 inspections, right? So anyway, that's kind of my thought, where I'm interested in seeing those kinds of numbers. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Meg?
I had a comment or question about another item really quick, if I could do that.
I think so. Let's go real quick, Bob, while you're here. So on Crystal's comment.
Through the chair, every roof is different, like every construction project is different. There is no hard correlation between cash and or value and number of inspections. Overall, you can draw inferences that the higher the dollar value, the greater the square foot, then the greater the at that point, then the greater the number of inspections created. But again, as we have gone away from the per inspection basis that we were an outlier in doing of any jurisdiction for remodels, it also applies to re-roofs. So we can build those ranges in, but ultimately most jurisdictions find that the fairest way is to just do straight up valuation. And overall, at the macro level, you get proportionate cost of inspections versus the cost of the work being done.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Meg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is for probably Chris Schutte. We just received an email today from Michelle McNulty about a lot of our quasi-judicial boards coming back online in May. And I didn't know if at the next or at a meeting or a work session, we could have a little bit of instruction on how to navigate the new website to make sure we're able to be up to date on the different notices, because it's all going to be electronic now. And I've been having a hard time finding them. Maybe it's me, maybe I just need help with it, but we're gonna wanna be able to make sure we're flagging these for our community councils as they're meeting in May, and I believe some are meeting in June, as these boards and folks keep going, because I know that tends to become a juggernaut later in front of the body if they didn't understand how to engage and get notices or get comments in.
Through the chair, absolutely. And it's going to be pushed out with the Federation as well, to make sure we cover as much community council territory as possible, but would be happy to provide more direction to the Assembly.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So moving on, because we're quickly approaching our 10:30. We're going to look at getting rid of the $40,000 shelf and changes to overall rates to accommodate that 130,000. And then with re-roofs, I guess we've asked Bob and Chris to look at dealing with those specifically with perhaps a fixed fee or by valuation. And I think where do we land on that real quickly?
So, Mr. Chair, we will come back to you with in a month's time with several different fee scenarios on the topics that were covered today, specific to the commercial re-roofs. I need to spend some time with Bob looking at the different scenarios before I commit to one over the other at this time.
Okay, thank you. And then, okay, so we're done with that issue then, the 3B.
Mr. Chair, Drew put himself in the queue.
Okay, Drew, is it on that issue?
Yeah, it just at the very end, I'm sorry to keep talking, but I think that the biggest thing more than any particular outcome we were looking for is to have things like the West High School roof, which is doing structural earthquake upgrades and everything, to be treated differently than resurfacing jobs. And I think that Bob has made a ton of great points about the difficulty in drawing a bright line distinction between the two and this, that, and the other. But at the same time, it does seem to be the case that for some roofs, having an inspector go out there and look at it twice will effectively protect the public interest, and that it's a fundamental order of magnitude different level of sort of investment and oversight required for that versus somebody who has a roof that's got a lot of damage or is getting major upgrades. So bifurcating and treating those two things differently is, I think, more of a goal than any particular outcome with one of them.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, moving on. We have in our five, I'm sorry, is there? Okay, we have legislative priorities and budget items for 2021, which I will postpone to another meeting. That's kind of our couple regular items. The next meeting, we've got the information that Bob and Chris have put forward on our fee issue, and then a couple other things to think about. It would pack a meeting, but maybe coming forward in May and June. A review of the Building Safety Service Area Customer Service Survey, and at some point, we've been looking at the Planning Department's work plan and maybe see where that has changed because of the problem. And I think Meg's point, maybe a quick review of the improvements of the website and how to use it better. Is there anything else for the future from the committee? Silence means no. Okay, any other issues? Do we have anyone from the public wants to speak for a moment? Can you see Mandy?
I don't see anybody else on from the public aside from just the commenters we've had.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone, we ready to adjourn?
Sounds good.
Move to adjourn.
All right, thank you.
Thank
All right,
you.
thanks everybody.
Good job, Mandy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mandy.
Thank you.
Great job. Thanks. See you all later.